Good evening, Howard University alums. I'm Dr. Anthony Wutoh, and I currently serve as the Provost and Chief Academic Officer at Howard University. We're certainly pleased that you have joined us this evening for the Alumni Insight Call. This evening, we're going to be focusing on academic matters and more specifically around accreditation. And so I have two colleagues joining me this evening who I'll introduce in a second. We have received a number of questions that we will review and then we will hopefully answer as well and appropriately as possible. But if there's time towards the end of the call, we will also open up for any questions that you may have as alums. And so our first guest this evening is Dr. Daphne Bernard. Dr. Bernard is a practicing pharmacist. She's a Howard University alum, and she currently serves as the Associate Provost for Institutional Accreditation and Assessment. Dr. Bernard has served in a variety of capacities here at Alma Mater, including as an Associate Dean in the College of Pharmacy, as the Interim Dean, culminating in her current role. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Bernard.
Thank you for having me.
And so maybe as we venture into the topic of accreditation, I thought it would be helpful if you shared for the alums and other guests who may be in the audience, exactly what is accreditation, why is it important to the university, and what do you do in your role?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So that question often comes up. What exactly is accreditation? What does it entail and why is it important? So if you can imagine, accreditation is really a way of an institution showing that it provides a quality academic experience to the students that it serves. And in doing that, it also is able to demonstrate that it operates in an ethically responsible manner and that it's financially healthy. Why is it important? Well, think about it. For most individuals, if you're a family and you're considering where your son or daughter is going to attend college, you want to make sure that they're going to get a good experience. And so the accreditation status is one way of seeing verification that this is a school that meets the standards that have been set forth for a high quality higher education institution. It's also important for accreditation for an institution because federal funds as well as state funds for some schools those are tied to accredited institutions. And so for those reasons, amongst a few other things, it is extremely important.
Okay. So we frequently talk about accreditation generally, but we know, and again, I think it will be helpful for our alums to understand when we talk about accreditation, from your role as the Associate Provost who focuses on accreditation, we may be talking about many things and multiple things. And so in your role, when we talk about accreditation, there may be separate accreditations for the university institutionally, as well as for the variety of programs we offer. If you can talk about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So the university is accredited by a regional accreditor, and our regional accreditor is Middle States, the Middle States Association. So Middle States oversees the well-being and the operations of the overall university. But in addition to Middle States for the institution's accreditation, we have 39 individual programs and centers that also have their unique program accreditors. And so in my role, one thing that I get an opportunity to do is I get to work with and review each one of those programs' self-studies, their documentation, their evidence that shows that they're meeting those accreditation standards so that they can remain compliant and have full accreditation. As an accreditation liaison officer, my primary role is to serve as kind of like the communication liaison between the upper administration of Howard University and Middle States, as well as with some of the other specialized accreditation programs.
Good. We'll come back to you in a second, but first I want to introduce our second panelist. Dr. Reuben Patterson. Dean Patterson currently serves as the Dean of the flagship, the College of Arts and Sciences here at Howard University. He is also an alum. In terms of his background, I think you have a very interesting background, Dean Patterson. You're an electrical engineer by training. That's your undergraduate degree from Florida State. You then completed a master's degree and then your PhD in sociology here at Howard University. So many folks don't know this. We actually have 3 engineers who serve as deans of our various colleges. Dean Anderson is the dean of the College of Engineering and Architecture. You serve as the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. And Dr. Wilbon, the dean of the School of Business, actually has his undergraduate degree also in engineering. But if you could tell us from your perspective, Dean Patterson, in this context, you also successfully served as the chair of the self-study committee that prepared us for a successful accreditation visit with Middle States. If you could tell us, well, first of all, what is a self-study and what does it have to do with an accreditation visit? Again, if you could share that with our alums in the audience.
Very good. Thank you, Provost. And actually, I always advise graduate students, because sometimes they ask about becoming a dean. And I said, actually, the best route to seeing to being a dean is get a degree in electrical engineering, because all 3 of us have degrees in electrical engineering. But yes, I always thought of it as, I recall my first conversation with Dr. Bernard in her office when she was sort of sizing me up to see if I could perhaps handle this role here. I conceived of it as like a giant take-home self-study that you get to work on as a group, that the examiner gives you the question that you're going to be examined on 2 years hence, and you are to go away and organize yourself and to pursue the data, collect the evidence, and then narrate that evidence to show that you are in compliance. You send that to Middle States, the examiner. They will review it, and then they come to campus to give you sort of like the oral exam on campus. So that's the way that I looked at this self-study. And there are these 7 standards ranging from mission and goals to design and the delivery of the educational experience, and ethics and integrity, and resources and planning and governance. And so 7 standards that all of Middle States campuses in its jurisdiction from DC up through New York have the same standards and the same criteria. And so how campuses organize themselves to do that, there are some similarities and there are some differences. We certainly looked at the 2009 self-study, the previous one one prior to ours. We learned a lot from that one because they did an outstanding job. But we saw it as like that was we wanted to meet that and even to exceed that in some areas on behalf of Howard University. So in a nutshell, Provost, that's what self-study is.
Okay. So just to give a context again to our audience, the university last went through an accreditation visit with Middle States about 10 years ago, and we were successfully reaccredited at that time. As an aside, this is the 100th anniversary of our first accreditation with Middle States, when Middle States was first founded as an accrediting body. And so Howard also has the distinction of being the first HBCU that was accredited by Middle States. But if I understand your explanation, a self-study is essentially the university conducting a self-assessment of where we believe we sit in terms of the 7 standards that Middle States has outlined. And so when we are visited by the accrediting body, they essentially review what we have reported in the self-study, and they check that against the standards And then they provide their assessment of whether or not we are in compliance with those middle state standards. Is that another way of trying to summarize it?
No, that was very good, Provost, because I was being a little glib there when I talked about the take-home examination. But you're absolutely right in terms of the specifics. Where again, they give you the criteria and the standards, and then you have to accumulate the evidence. Like we have to show that we're engaging in continuous improvement, that we are effective in meeting our mission and goals. You got to show that. You got to show how are you doing it, the progress that you are actually making, the challenges that you have experienced in the process of doing that. You got to show that you are that the students are learning what it is that they are expected to learn at the course level, at the discipline level, and also at the institutional level. You have to accumulate all that data each step along the way to demonstrate that you actually are doing it. And so actually, Middle State started in 1971 in terms of having the self-study as a requirement. So it's been a long progress over the 100-year period of this existence, and new features were added on over the decades. But this one started in 1971, requiring institutions to examine themselves and produce the data. And so they don't want fluff or anything like that, because they can read your brochures to understand fluff, and to learn how the very positive aspects of your campus. They want to know, because they are, as Dr. Bernard mentioned, they are sort of a gatekeeper to access to public funding, to the massive, millions of dollars that the university will be enabled to get Title IV funds if we are accredited. So Middle States wants to know, they want to see data, hard data, and then you can actually narrate that data to tell a story about the Howard experience.
Okay, two questions also then, Dean Patterson. One, how many faculty, students, and staff were involved in writing the self-study? Was this a group of 3 or 4 people who really summarized what they thought about the university? And then my second question is, who did the accrediting body actually meet when they conducted their review?
Very good, thank you. So we had a nice round number of 110 persons participated in the self-study process. They came from all 13 schools and colleges. They came from many administrative offices. They involved, from full professors to assistant professors, to graduate students, to undergraduate students, and certainly staff as well. Academic staff as well as administrative staff. So they were all involved over the whole 2-year process. And we organized ourselves into 8 working groups. And there's a chair appointed to each of the working groups. And each working group comprised of, 12 or so colleagues from around the university. And they worked for, several months collecting the data, and interrogating the data, writing preliminary narratives. And then we met on a monthly basis, and they had to go through multiple revisions, revise and resubmit. And as we, Dr. Bernard and I and others were, continuing asking questions, saying that we need more data here. You didn't explain yourself sufficiently there. How do you know this? Can you get corroborating evidence? And we have to just remind colleagues that it's not just so much we're asking the question, but we anticipate the questions that our reviewers may be asking. And so we want to just, be on the offensive, if you will, in terms of presenting an avalanche of data that they might anticipate. I think your second question, Provost, was around who actually reviewed.
Who did the Middle States reviewers actually meet with when they came to campus? And maybe we should also explain that also, I believe we were originally scheduled for an accreditation visit in last spring. And that visit was postponed secondary to COVID. And so if you could tell us about the visit that actually took place and who they met with.
Yes, very good. So as the provost mentioned, the Middle States team was expected to arrive in the spring of last year, but because of COVID, then it was delayed. And at that time, the Middle States and the other 7 regional accrediting bodies allow for institutions to have virtual site visits. And that was, even a physical on-campus site visit has its own kind of tricky aspects to it, and waters to successfully navigate. But this was something different because not a lot of institutions have had experience with, hosting virtual site visits. Howard University has had, as was mentioned, 9 or so previous ones from these decadal, self-studies, but we didn't have any, obviously, with regard to the virtual site visit, and also we couldn't reach out to but a limited number of institutions that have also gone through that. So that poses its own set of unique challenges. Nonetheless, because we're quick study here and we had a really, really great team, we proceeded with identifying the individuals based on the template that we got from Middle States. Middle States provided a template of the groups that they wanted to meet with, and then we needed to go and identify the persons who were best aligned with those various groups. Some of them are pretty obvious, right? Student leaders, HUSA leaders, the faculty senate, those faculty participants, as well as chairs, as well as the provost and associate provost, the general counsel's office, communications, those areas. So whatever they asked for in terms of the categories of Howard, campus community, members of which, then we just simply identify the individuals to populate those various groups.
Okay, thank you, Dean. That's very helpful. Dr. Bernard, one of the things that we heard frequently during the accreditation visit and the lead up to the visit was related to assessment. And we frequently heard conversations about assessment, how is the university assessing a variety of things. Since that is also part of your role, can you tell us generally what is assessment, how your role sort of oversees the assessment process for the university and how that is related to our accreditation process?
Yeah, so when you think of assessment, I like for you to think of self-examination. I like for you to think of intentionality. I like for you to think of evidence and being able to demonstrate that you're using data for improvement. And so as how that relates to accreditation, every facet of the university, from the policies that we create and that we implement to how our academic programs are serving our students and those student outcomes, to academic planning, everything that we do, we want to be able to show that we are operating off of data and making decisions around data and strategizing around data. And we're putting strategies in place to continuously drive improvement. And then after you do it, you go back and you look at it again. So it really is a way for the university, as well as all of its different units, to clearly show that we have a procedure in place where we're going about ensuring that there's continuous improvement across all facets of the institution. In my role, I get to work with a dynamic team, in addition to, being able to kind of serve the faculty overall, but quite a bit of the legwork in assessment is done by our institutional research and assessment unit, which is under the office of the provost, being able to really do two things: speak to the processes that all units use to drive their own improvement, help them to identify metrics, things that'll help them determine, are we doing what we say that we're doing, and how can we do it better? And then last but certainly not least, the data, gathering that data about their program, as well as about other programs across the university, across the nation, so that we can look at trending and use that in our strategies.
So it sounds like assessment is part of a continuous quality improvement process. And so does that suggest that part of the rationale and the reason for accreditation is to ensure that the university is continually improving itself, and that we're looking at things that we're doing well, potentially looking at things that we may not be doing well. We outline a plan to improve those things, and then we sort of continually take steps to improve every aspect of the institution. Is that sort of what they're trying to get at?
Absolutely. And my favorite part I'll throw in there, especially as we're talking about middle states, the assessment helps us to make sure that we are committed to living up to our mission. And so the self-study, the site visit, the evidence inventory that we build, looking at our student outcomes, looking at all these things, at the end of the day, middle states, like any other regional accreditor, they want to see how we are demonstrating our commitment to living up to that mission. And again, how we're providing evidence to show that.
Okay, excellent, excellent. That's helpful. Well, we did receive several questions in advance, and so I'm going to turn to a few of the questions that we received from our alum, and hopefully we can provide them as thorough a response as possible. The first question reads, in the press release announcing the approval of the reaccreditation, it was mentioned that Howard earned numerous commendations from middle states. So Dr. Bernard, the question is, what school, department, or programs were cited for commendation, or how was the commendation attributed to the university?
Yeah, so commendation, I think is really important for the audience to understand. A commendation from an accreditor, what it means is you have been recognized as going above and beyond what is expected, and you are actually seen as an exemplar to your peer institutions. So a commendation is a pretty big thing. For our site visit report, we received 11 commendations. Our 11 commendations came from 4 of the standards, from ethics and integrity all the way down to governance and administration. But the one that stood out the most was that last one, standard 7, governance and administration. We received 7 of the 11 commendations under that standard alone. A few of the things that really impressed our site visit team was the role that our board of trustees plays in living up to their fiduciary responsibility of oversight, but at the same time, having a pretty good knowledge and understanding of the operations, but still operating within their proper capacity. They also were really impressed with the Chair Leadership Academy that was created since our last self-study, and the wonderful work that's coming out of that, as well as a couple of other things, including revision of our faculty handbook, which took a lot of work. But out of all the different areas, that standard 7 with governance and administration really stood out.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I think that there was a follow-up question. I don't know if it was from the same alum or not, but it asks, likewise, there may have been a limited number of schools or departments or programs who may require a corrective action plan or more attention than other plans. And so there was a question whether or not middle states identified any programs where they may not have fully met the standards. So again, if you can speak to the process and the role that middle states plays.
Absolutely. So after a site visit team comes in to visit and verify what's in the evidence and what's in the self-study report itself, they they come up with a report. And I'm pleased to say that in our report, it was determined that we met all requirements. There were no requirements that were laid out for us. A requirement means you're non-compliant with one or more of the criteria under the standard. We received no requirements whatsoever. And we're extremely pleased with that. And what that means is there's no area that was identified as being in need of any additional follow-up at this time, which is outstanding.
Okay, so it sounds like this was an extremely successful reaccreditation visit. And so Dean Patterson, I'll direct this next question to you, and it reads, I understand this was a 2-year process. What was the most challenging aspect of the reaccreditation process? Was it collecting and processing the data, or was it something else?
Well, thank you for that. And that's a good question. And I actually challenged now to come up with a challenge really that I had with the self-study. And I think really it was almost in a sense like, uneventful because, not having major challenges, because we got it right at the outset by appointing exactly the right working group chairs, those who will be responsible and have leadership and working with the team, organizing the team, and collecting the data, and producing the sub reports, if you will, of the self-study. And it's kind of like when we were, appointing the chairs, it's like I looked at that as like as I appoint individuals within the college. I always ask the question is, are you willing to take out the trash? Which is a barometer for, are you willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done, to meet the mission of the collective? And we appointed chairs who have that, who operated in that particular fashion, who are mission oriented. And then from there, just appointing the other dozen or so members of each of the working groups. And then they worked very well together, harmoniously. And then, not unlike what, the president and the provost have done, and having, built the cabinet and built the decanal corps, and now these particular leaders are carrying out their, their duties, and the institution is sort of working, firing on all cylinders in that regard. So that's kind of how this self-study actually went. But there was one thing that was a challenge that I had to make sure that I wanted to try to get right, and that was the thing that I alluded to earlier, which is that from December 2018 through, I would say June 2019, we had monthly revise and resubmits. And so we had to then, challenge our colleagues to go back and do more. These are individuals who are very accomplished. They've written many books, have been edited many journals and the like. And so the idea of being, asked to go back and do more and do more and do more, that was a bit of a challenge, because we had to then remind them that again, it's not us. We're anticipating questions from reviewers, and anything that we may ask is possible that they may ask as well. So we may as well go on ahead and address it in advance. So just, consistently remind the team of that it is about the institution. It's not about us as individuals. And then once, everybody fully got that, then the job was pretty easy.
Okay, good. Well, this is a question for both of you. Were alumni taking into consideration or involved in the reaccreditation process, and what role did alumni play in the process? So I'll ask that to both of you, or if either of you want to respond.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it at first. So I would say yes, largely based on our student outcomes and job placement data. One thing that Middle States is extremely interested in is looking at what happens with our graduates. Our graduates are our product. And so the success of our alumni, everything from, again, their job placement to how they contribute back to the university in terms of giving, as well as how they pay back their student loans. So those alumni related outcomes were certainly factored in and helped us to demonstrate that we are, providing a quality experience in a responsible way at the university. In addition to that, and Dr. Patterson will probably speak to this as well, many of us wear a couple of hats. We wear several hats. I'm one of those individuals who happens to be an alum. So you had alumni who are faculty and administrators who were very, very much also engaged in the process. So I would say definitely alumni input was helpful. Dean Patterson?
No, I have nothing to add. You stole the show on that one, Dr. Bernard.
It's interesting that you had that response. One of the alums who asked the question actually ended her question with this statement. Being a Howard alumna, it's important to me that Howard maintains its accreditation because it increases the value of our degree. And thank you very much for your leadership on this. So Dean Patterson, did you want to reflect on that, the importance of accreditation, not only to our current students and future students, but to our alums?
Yes, very, very much so. I mean, this is really crucial. This is kind of like the ball game, because again, it's access to Title IV funding. First and foremost, and so that's why. So there's that one. Why it is in fact important. But in addition to that, as if that wasn't enough, is the fact that it affects your ability to attract new and talented students. So for the fall 2021 class, we received some 30,000 applications from very extraordinarily talented students with an average GPA of above 3.7. If we were not an accredited institution, we would not be getting that many applications, and we would not be getting that caliber of student applicants. So it's that. We're also fortunate enough to have had, in the college, as is the case in other schools and colleges, new faculty appointments, and the these candidates for these positions from physics to philosophy, and every discipline in between, extraordinarily talented individuals, and we're just really aching to join the Howard faculty. We wouldn't be getting those if we weren't accredited. And then also those who are out there and who are who are advancing in their careers. And of course, Howard is highly ranked within the top 5 for sure in terms of the upward social mobility. That upward social mobility with our alumni is a product of the fact of how in high esteem the university is held by institutions. By looking at a Howard graduate and having great expectations. And then also the students as well, having that sense of validation with the education, from the education that they received at Howard University, that they can in fact, succeed. And if we weren't accredited, then those institutions would not be valuing Howard, alums and giving them opportunities, and they wouldn't be experiencing the social upward mobility. So this is the accreditation. Institutional accreditation is the linchpin of the success of the university.
Okay, excellent. So here's another question I'm going to address to both of you, but I'm going to ask each of you to answer it a little bit differently. The question is, how do we balance, or how does the university balance the requirement for 120 credit hours that a student needs to graduate in the vast majority of our programs? How do we balance the portion of credits that are attributed to their major versus making sure that we are producing well-rounded students with a solid liberal arts education? So Dr. Bernard, maybe I'll start with you and ask you, based on the Middle States standard, how do the standards address general education as opposed to courses that a student may take for their major? And is there any specific requirement regarding how that is balanced?
Yeah, great question. So for the most part, Middle States, they really operate off of under the guidance of the Department of Education, quite frankly. And so typically about a third, a third or a fourth of your hours, they expect to kind of be in what they would consider general education. In other words, for any student that graduates from Howard University, what are the things, the core competencies that you would want them to achieve? And so Gen Ed is one component. The majority of your time actually should be spent in your major. And then there's a little bit of wiggle room so that you can explore. We call those exploratory credits. So, for middle states, again, under the Department of Education, we look at a certain number around in the 20s, 20, 25, something like that, in terms of credit hours that are Gen Ed, and everything else really should focus largely on getting you career ready. And really getting you immersed in your major. And again, a lot of that is there's a little bit of exploratory room. I do want to mention one other thing though, because remember, we have 39 programs and some programs and then 2 centers that have their own unique programmatic accreditation standards. And you got to remember, for those, most of them, they dictate how, their curriculum is kind of laid out for them. The students have to cover these courses and these experiential experiences and so on and so forth. So some of that, the remaining 100 hours, as mentioned, some of that is kind of dictated based on the program and the curriculum scheme that those programs kind of operate under.
Thank you. Dean Patterson, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to ask it in the context as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, where the majority of general education courses are taught for students throughout all of our undergraduate programs. How do you balance the need for a Howard University student to successfully accomplish a liberal arts education and have exposure to a wide variety of topical areas, with the expectation that a student, whether they're majoring in biology or chemistry or sociology, that they get enough depth in their major that they can be competitive with students who graduate from other institutions who have majored in these same fields?
Yeah, thanks for that, Provost, and also for the alum who gave us that excellent question. I would just say that that we and the College of Arts and Sciences at Howard University, we know that we are providing students with a world-class liberal arts education. They're certainly grounded in social justice and also in the African diasporic experience. So the full stop there. We also know that students are receiving a well-rounded liberal arts education. They have to take a number of hours in the humanities and also in natural sciences and in fine arts and also in the social sciences. They get all of that. They also have to take a course in African American studies. That's unique to Howard here. And also they have to take a course in philosophy, also unique. They have to take a course in speech. And they also have to have meet a foreign language requirement as well.
And that's in the College of Arts and Sciences.
Right, and so the largest, well, they have a plurality of the undergraduate students, and but not, whereas in the other schools, in undergraduate schools and colleges, or the schools and colleges with undergraduate degree programs, it's not as much, and you wouldn't expect that from professional schools as opposed to a liberal arts college. So it's that. But also we know that our students in these in the other areas, so we're liberal arts and then traditional liberal arts, and we're also we have a number of STEM fields as well. And we know that our graduates, for instance, who complete in the STEM areas, they go off and do quite well. As we all know that Howard produces more African American undergraduates who go on to medical school than any other university. And they're primarily coming out of our college of arts and sciences, to meet that. and also those who in large numbers going on for graduate degrees in STEM fields, again, out of our fields. So we're able to balance it well with liberal arts and students receiving a well-rounded education for them to engage in self-discovery and discovery of the world around them, and knowing how to continuously improve both themselves and their world. And then at the same time, having the technical skills as well in order to succeed in whatever their endeavors happen to be.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to our next question, which isn't specifically related to accreditation, but I think it's an important question to answer. And then I'll ask an accreditation related contextual question. And the question is, how are we responding to the percentage of Howard University students, since they're largely engaged in distance learning, who may be struggling with depression, anxiety, or other mental health issue? And I can respond to that generally. A number of things that we're doing at the university. First of all, we've hired additional counselors in our counseling center to help support our students. And again, because the vast majority of our undergraduate students are remote and online, we've also contracted with a number of services that are providing mental health counseling, either online or through telephonic means. We've also contracted with a number of entities that are nationwide, so that our students may have the opportunity to go to counseling, even if they're not in the DC metropolitan area. We certainly are concerned about this issue. We know that the pandemic has been very difficult on our students, as well as the overlap with the systemic racism reckoning taking place around the country that has also been very negatively impactful on our students. But based on that question, I'll also ask, during the accreditation visit, did they assess the counseling services that we're providing to our students, or was there also some assessment of the ancillary services that our students are receiving above and beyond the academic education that we provide? Dr. Bernard, I'll ask you to respond to that first.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I do want to say this is important. It's an important question for all of us because these are students, and that's what we're here for. For the accreditation visit, there's a whole standard from middle states that addresses support of the student experience. And so, they're not just concerned about, students graduating on time and how we retain them, how we support those students, including how we address their mental health and providing services to them, adequate services to them, is also included. And yes, that was absolutely evaluated. And I do want to add, and I want to really give kudos to the provost and the administration. We've done check-ins. One way that we make sure that we address this is, again, that assessment. We have to do check-ins with the students periodically just so that we can find out how they're doing. And we've even made some adjustments to things like our course evaluations. You'll see 2 new questions that were added for this semester as well, that talk about how has remote learning impacted your learning in this particular course. What are we doing right? What is going well? And what are the things, what challenges are you having? So again, having those check-ins to see how things are going is very important. Is very informative. And we take that information and we take action based on it.
Okay, thank you. And there's another question that isn't necessarily specific to accreditation, but I think we can provide a direct response, but also link it to our accreditation process. And that question is, Morehouse College is addressing community educational disparity by launching an online program to help Black males with some credit to complete their college education. Has Howard given any thought to establishing a similar program? And that's a great question. And so I'll provide the initial response in that, yes, we are looking at the creation of a degree completion program, particularly for Howard alums that have started their Howard education and for a variety of reasons may not have been able to complete, perhaps secondary to life changes, financial circumstances, et cetera. So we are developing a degree completion program that we'll be sharing additional information about, as well. Like every other university in this country and most around the world, we had to transition because of the pandemic over spring break to initially an entirely online education format. So we provided, I think it was close to 9,000 courses, well, certainly over 5,000 courses that we had to transition from face-to-face to online instruction. So my question related to this question, related to our accreditation process, is did middle states also assess online programs? So we know that the vast majority of our programs currently are face-to-face. Did middle states conduct any review of our online programs? And then I'll sort of follow up with another question regarding what our plans are online. Dean Patterson, maybe if you could respond to that question.
Okay, thank you, sir. So yes, as we submitted our original final self-study, if you will, I think that was in February, right, of
March the 4th.
Right, okay, yeah, right, it should be, that's in memory here, for sure, for life. But so March 4th, and then as a result of the pandemic, and we wouldn't have the the site visit until virtual site visit down until like October, we had to submit, because like with the delay, we had to submit changes that have happened since the original submission in March. So that was done, and part of that as well, A, gave us opportunity to, and B, responded to their query, is to know how was our adjustment. In other words, that they had from in the original study, self-study, we had demonstrated that there's this about student learning, again at the course and discipline and institutional level, and how we are assessing that, and the students are learning what we are saying that they expected to learn, with various evident forms of evidence to show that, direct and indirect. But they had to say, okay, how can you speak to student learning in this emergency environment? As you began to wind down the spring semester, what was the learning like in the second half of the semester? And I would imagine that it didn't come through, wasn't said explicitly, but I would imagine that middle states and other institutions, at least for that emergency period from, I don't know, what, mid-March through the end of April, there was perhaps some type of forbearance on the part of the institutional accreditors because of that emergency situation. But then also it's a look at what did you learn from that experience? And that's because, again, that's what it is about. It's another thing to get across to our alums as well. The institutional accreditors don't expect you to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect, higher educational institution. The thing is that, are you meeting the criteria? Are you learning from your experiences continuously? And are you making improvements continuously over time? That's what they want to see. So how did you make adjustments based on what you learned, the data that you collected for the spring semester, and how was that going to inform you about the upcoming fall term, preparing for a full academic year of being online, and going from that emergency mode to a thoughtful, online, high quality learning experience? that's what the Middle States was probing for, Provost.
Thank you, Dean. Dr. Bernard, there was a question. Have we identified any departments that we think may be in danger of having their accreditation revoked, and how would you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I think that's again, another important question, because we have to constantly keep an eye on where our programs are. What are the threats? What are the opportunities? As at this point, we have not identified any of our programs that are in jeopardy of losing their accreditation. And actually, that's one reason that I'm a part of the provost team, making sure that I'm constantly engaged, have an eye out, finding out what are the things that the programs need so that they can continue to serve the students well. And so thank goodness at this point, we have not identified any of those programs.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Dean Patterson, another question, not necessarily related to accreditation, but how has the pandemic crisis intensified previous academic issues and contributed to a list of new challenges? And so how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected us academically? I guess the question may relate either to our students, to our faculty, to the university at large, and how are we addressing these new challenges?
Yeah, so, okay, thank you, sir. So I think I have, as Dean, a pair of watchwords that I use quite a bit with students and faculty, and those being, flexibility and empathy. That's what we need in this particular period. We need colleagues to you would think it wouldn't be necessary, but I found it to be helpful to remind colleagues that students all over the country, or students all over the world, in these different time zones, and with circumstances that are very much challenging, health-wise, economic-wise, stress-wise. This is just extraordinarily difficult, and we've got to not lower standards. That's not what we're talking about, but to be creative and to be thoughtful about how it is that we can actually have students to have these basically it's essentially the same learning experience with the same level of competencies that we would expect without the pandemic, and then to examine for that and to assess that in different ways. That was the challenge that I consistently tried to engage with faculty around. And at the same time, I turn it to the students and remind the students as well that yes, they are professors, but they got real world lives also in terms of maintaining, raising families and tending to, having elder care and having health issues as well. So also understand what they might be going through. So I was consistently reminding, both sides, if you will, around showing some flexibility and also a good dose of empathy as well.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Bernard, did you want to add anything in terms of how the pandemic may have exacerbated any existing issues or created new ones? I guess one of them being that we're on Zoom now, and we spend much of our day on Zoom or on Teams. But.
Yeah, other than Zoom fatigue, I concur with Dean Patterson's thoughts. This really is a time to be more understanding and be more flexible. It's challenging for everyone. I will say the technology piece was something that we had to, like all other institutions, we had to really get up to speed with that. Training faculty on using the technology, providing additional computers to not just faculty, but also students as well who were in need. And so those were the challenges that come to mind that were due to the pandemic. But I also, I have to acknowledge that there's some opportunity here. And one thing I like to say is, I think from this pandemic, we've learned that we can do some things that we didn't realize we could do at first. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what good things what unique creative things we've come up with that we'll be able to carry forward.
Excellent.
Yeah, I like that. I'm sorry, I'm just going to.
No, go on, Dean.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say, I like the way that Dr. Bernard mentioned that around, opportunities, because prior to the pandemic, maybe 92-94% of our courses were face-to-face, and that now many faculty members said that they made declarations that they will never teach online. But since then, as a result of it, obviously we have built up this enormous, like other institutions, this enormous proficiency with quality online instructions. And those faculty members, some of those faculty members who made those declarations now really enjoy this, and also being quite creative with these tools. So we have that, but there are also, as we know in higher education, that we're all challenged to generate more revenue, to have revenue growth to outpace our recurring expenses. And these online courses that we are going to be delivering over time will be a way of generating more revenue for graduate certificate programs and undergraduate degree program, certainly master's degree programs as well. So this is a great opportunity as well. So yes, there's been some challenges associated with this, but there's also problem with opportunities as well.
Okay, excellent. I'm looking at my watch, and I realize that we are almost up on the hour. I thought we would have some time to field some questions from our alumni audience, but unfortunately, your conversation has been so engaging that the time has gone quickly. So I certainly want to thank both of you, not just for joining this Alumni Insight call, but I want our alum to know that each of you were probably the most significant leaders in terms of making sure that the university was appropriately prepared for our Middle States accreditation visit, and that the visit went as well as we could have expected, actually even better than we could have expected. And so on behalf of our Howard University alums, on behalf of the entire Howard University community, I want to thank you, Dr. Bernard, for the role that you have played as Associate Provost for Institutional Accreditation and Assessment, and Dean Patterson. We certainly want to thank you for your ongoing contributions as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences and as the chair of our Middle States self-study. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you, alums, for joining the call, and please be on the lookout for the next Alumni Insight call. Additional information will be forthcoming and will be shared with you. Thank you, God bless, and have a good evening.